Apple has so much stuff to announce, and they started with the Apple Watch and iPad in a 1-hour event. If you're hoping to see the iPhone, maybe you're disappointed, but there's some stuff in there that should have you very excited for what will be coming up with the iPhone. We're gonna dig into that right now.
Good morning and welcome.
Let's talk about the basics of what happened, but more importantly, the stuff underneath, like what's really interesting here in the details. Let's start with the Apple Watch Series 6. It now has a blood oxygen sensor. That's kind of like the headline health feature, but also comes in a bunch of new colors, and it has the faster S6 processor inside. But honestly, the Series 5 was so good, why be excited now? Like I've been very happy with it. Always on display was the biggest thing on my wish list, but is it worth upgrading? I mean, if you have the 5, probably not. Upgrading your watch every single year is a bit crazy. I often say this about the phones too. 2 years? I think it's worth it though. If you didn't already upgrade for the always on display, this is the time. My favorite part is that now when you're outside, it's supposed to be up to 2.5 times brighter. Apple also attributed this to the processor, which I don't really know how that's working. I think it's just that more processor efficiency means there's more power left over to keep the display brighter. Anyway, I'll take it. I'm very happy for it. Also, the battery now charges in only 1.5 hours. This has always bugged me about the Apple Watches. It is sort of slow to charge, so you can't just top it up before you leave in the morning. But anyway, this faster charge time, it will definitely help. I also really like that they showed off a photographer watch face. I'm not sure if they clarified this in the keynote, but that's using a complication from an app called Lumi. And what it's doing is telling you when the best light of the day is going to be, either where you are or in other locations. And also looks like it has a camera trigger. I love this. We've been using an app for our photography called Sunseeker, where you can track exactly when and where the sun's going to dip behind the horizon. This is so helpful for photography, especially for scouting a location so you know when to come back. The prices for these new watches are $399 for the 42mm and $429 for the 44mm USD. Then there was also the Apple Watch SE for $279, and it's missing the blood oxygen and always on display. So when I'm choosing a watch, I wouldn't be willing to give up those features, especially the display. But what this is for, in my humble opinion, is that this is for kids and grandparents, or parents, or whoever it is, whatever loved ones you have that may not be interested in buying their own Apple Watch. It's the one that you give them so that you can have features like fall detection or alerts, or get a hold of them when they're in different places. Maybe they don't have a phone yet. Maybe they forgot their phone. So that's how I'd think about these two watches. The Series 6, that's the one you buy for yourself. And the SE, that's what you buy for someone else. And next, the iPads. But I mean, there's so much to go into here. We went into way more detail on the podcast, actually. So if you open up whatever you listen to podcasts on, go crack open your old Zune and search for the Stalman podcast in any podcast player, download the latest episode where I'm talking to Casey Liss of the Accidental Tech podcast about all this stuff in much more detail, much longer. But yeah, iPads.
The new iPad 8th generation. Compared to the already fast chip in last year's iPad, it has a 40% faster CPU and delivers a massive 2 times jump in graphics.
The standard, cheaper, like entry-level iPad was upgraded, but that's kind of boring. So let's talk about the Air, because that's where all the action is. And I didn't see that coming at all. Basically, the iPad Air is now very close to being an iPad Pro, but at a lower price. It starts at just $599 US rather than $799 for the iPad Pro. So if you watched the announcement, you already got excited about this and plan to go buy one of the new colors. Like maybe the blue one looks pretty cool. But what's especially interesting is what this tells us about the potential of the iPhone 12. It'll be the first Apple device to have the A14 Bionic processor, which is kind of weird for it to show up in an iPad first, but this is what we're going to see probably kind of everywhere, definitely in the iPhone and maybe in Macs. They shrunk their process from 7 nanometers down to 5 nanometers. Now, why is that exciting?
The incredibly small scale of this process challenges the laws of physics. In fact, we're talking about a scale so small that the dimensions of these 5 nanometer transistors are measured in atoms.
It means there can be up to 80% more transistors than on the 7 nanometer process. Shrinking down from that is a huge deal for the future in terms of speed, size, and efficiency. Apple says that the new 6-core design could provide up to a 40% boost in CPU performance. The 4-core GPU could mean 30% boost in graphics, and the 16-core neural engine could be up to twice as fast. I mean, we got to see benchmarks here, but these look very promising. The most exciting part that they didn't spend as much time on is the Fingerprint Reader, which is now located on the power button. So if you already have an iPad Pro and it has Face ID and you love it, maybe that's, why is that exciting? But if you happen to use an iPhone with Face ID, you can probably imagine why that would be useful, especially if you've been wearing a mask lately, which, you should be. There have been a lot of conversations over the past few years about how Apple could include 2 different forms of authentication, and it looks like this would be a pretty amazing solution without resorting to something more complicated like a fingerprint reader built into the screen. So if what we're seeing in the iPad Air is a big version of an iPad 12, there are a lot of reasons to be excited. A word of caution though, this might not happen in 2020. iPhones need a lot more ramp up time in production because they make a lot more of them. So these features may or may not be making it to the 12. Let's just wait and see. It'll only be a few more weeks. Apple also announced Fitness Plus, which in the past I would have thought was a pretty strange addition. But with the fitness story on the watch, it's a pretty good integration. Plus, Apple's been producing a lot of video content lately, and they're pretty darn good at it. I think the secret sauce here is going to be that Apple Watch combination, kind of like Peloton. It's like you buy this big fancy toy. I mean, in their case, it's an electric bike, and in this case, it's not big at all. I guess it's a watch. But you buy this cool gadget, and then you want to get the most out of it. Like you want to find excuses and ways to use it. And these videos are going to tie into it really well. Like they're actively connecting to the watch as you're working out, sending updates back and forth so you can see them on the screen, you're getting them on your wrist. It's really interesting. I got to try it out. Apple finally announced bundle pricing for their services. It's going to be called Apple One. For individuals, it's $15, family, $20, Premier, $30. There's a lot of different features that are included in all these. For me, I'm going to be looking at the Premier plan because it's really the best value. And Apple, I know you were thinking about this. It's the only one where you get 2 terabytes of iCloud storage. That's the reason that it's really important to me. We're already using Apple Music and Apple TV, and depending what your package is, you really could be saving money by using one of these plans, or best case, you spend the same money and then get some other stuff for free. And that's one of the things I think will be very interesting here. Some of the Apple services that may not be as popular, like Apple Arcade. I love Apple Arcade. It's a really smart idea, but after I'd played most of the games in it, I kind of stopped going back to it. Once it's bundled into something I'm already paying for, I'm going to use it a lot more often. And I think that means the developers that are creating really interesting titles over there that wouldn't necessarily succeed in the App Store are going to see more support from Apple because there's a wider user base. I want Apple Arcade to succeed. Same with Apple News Plus, which I don't know, it's had kind of mixed reviews. I never paid for it, so I don't have much experience with it. But if I have it in a bundle, there are articles I come across all the time that I'd be happy to not have a paywall in front of them. What we're all wondering about is if this can be the same kind of secret sauce that Prime was for Amazon, where people just get it because, it's only a little more expensive, and I guess the analogy breaks down. But there's some things like, to me, iCloud, that's the one thing I'm going to pay for no matter what, because backing up wirelessly has saved our butts a few times now. So if there's a downside here, it's that the cheaper plans, family and individual, don't have a whole lot of iCloud storage included with them. You're going to want the Premier to get 2 terabytes. I wonder what the pricing is to get the smaller plans and add the, I'm not sure. There's some things to work out here. But overall, I do think Apple's on the right track with this, and I think a lot of people are going to get bundles. Oh, and by getting Premier, that also means that we'll end up getting Fitness Plus, which it's another one of those like, maybe I wouldn't have started paying for it. Like I would have thought about it, but now I've already got an Apple Watch. Like, yeah, of course, I'm going to start using it. And you can share Premier with up to 5 people. I mean, I think Apple knows a lot of people are going to go for this one. And if that's not enough for you, let's find out what Casey Liss thinks about all this.
This lock button, or whatever they call it, top button Touch ID is very interesting to me. And the reason it's very interesting to me, as someone who really loves Face ID, is, hey, every time I leave the house now, I'm wearing a mask. And you know what doesn't work that well with Face ID? When you have your mask on. So I am very interested and very curious to see if this new lock button with a Touch ID sensor ends up shipping on the iPhone or iPhone 12 Pro or whatever this year's phones are, because I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot of the most interesting stuff about the iPad Air, is that it's all the signals of what we're probably going to see. Like it's weird. It's almost like a series of leaks of iPhone 12 features.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah,
I've heard people mention, and I didn't really validate if this is going to be true, but this should be effectively the same processor as in the 12.
Yep. I mean, nobody knows for
exactly
sure, but
the
yes.
same or similar. I mean, we'll find out, I guess.
Similar. Yeah, I should know this off the top of my head, but my recollection is that the iPad typically gets a tweaked version of the iPhone chip. So this is what, the A14, I think that's right, A14X perhaps, and presumably the next iPhone will get an A14, just plain old A14. And obviously we don't know if that's true. We don't know what the differences are if it is true, but it certainly stands to reason exactly what you said, that this is quite likely the processor in the next iPhone. And supposedly it's pretty fast. Go figure.